Tantalus Entertainment presents the Killer Score Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the newest episode of Killer Score. I am your host, Dalton Morrison, also known as Sick Jacket Man online. This is the podcast where I, with my hosts Aaron Murray and Rich Eckert, record and talk about films that we believe deserve to have their scores discussed, along with just films that we believe deserve a bit more light. And this episode will be the start to our summer series, where we will, maybe not a whole series, but we thought it was best to intro ourselves back up after that last excursion with a movie to properly kick off the summer season.
Indeed, and what a better way to introduce the summer than with Stephen King, specifically with coming-of-age stories, learning your parents aren't gods, and deconstructing an entire point of American history. Oh, and also corpses.
Yes. It is easily, in my opinion, and even in the author himself's opinion, one of the best adaptations of his work. Also looked like one of the shorter turnaround periods between a film adaptation and the book, having only come out 4 years after the source material. For those unaware, the original story for the film we are covering today, Stand By Me, was known in the collection it came out in as The Body. It was a novel known as Different Seasons that was comprised of 4 different novellas, each set during a different season. It's also probably the Stephen King collection with the most adaptations, as 3 of the 4 stories in said collection have been adapted to film. The other 2, for those curious, are Apt People and The Shawshank Redemption, which was originally known as Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption.
Subtitle, Hope Springs Eternal.
Yes, it was the spring story. Every story, as the title implied, was set during a different season. The only one that has not seen a adaptation was Dolores Claiborne, mostly due to the fact that, well, it seems like it would be a very hard story to adapt due to the nature of it. But, getting back to the topic at hand, King has had a lot of adaptations done of his work, and I feel like there's a lot of misconception surrounding King. I see a lot of people seem to push this narrative that King basically hates, like, a bunch of adaptations of his work. And that's, from what I did on my research, really not the case. There's some high-profile ones that just seem to overshadow everything. And don't get me wrong, there are bad adaptations of King's work out there.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I think the one that everyone was referencing in regards to his supposed hatred of his adaptations was, of course, Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining, which, while
being a fantastic movie, not a great adaptation.
Of course, yes.
It strips a lot of the humanity out of the original novel.
Especially in the case of Jack Torrance.
Oh, absolutely.
And King has issue with it himself because Kubrick not only misconstrued a lot of the themes of the novel in order to make a stylistic movie, he outright ignored King's input on a lot of things and was just a dick about everything. In my opinion, I don't think The Shining should be as celebrated or have had the critical reevaluation it did, mostly due to the fact that, in my opinion, the film does not cover its main theme of abuse very well, especially given the fact that acting is supposed to be a space in which we can explore feelings and emotions. It's not a space where you're supposed to specifically make people involved in the production feel complicated emotions like that.
Especially in the case of
Shelley
Duvall, who has suffered a lot since that movie and since retiring.
Mm-hmm. And it's a shame due to the fact that Kubrick himself encourages it. You can see in behind-the-scenes stuff where Shelley Duvall is complaining about the fact that one of the stunts and scenes had hair pulled out of her head, and he just, like, mocks her and turns to the camera and says, "Don't sympathize with Shelley," to the crew.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very ouch.
Yeah. I feel like there are directors who have covered that topic of abuse in relationships much better and in a much safer setting. David Lynch famously is one who I feel does that a lot. But this film was, like I said, one of the shorter turnarounds of an adaptation. I think the only one I could find that had a shorter turnaround was actually Carrie, which was King's big break.
Yeah.
The Carrie novel came out only 2 years before the film adaptation. And to turn it around back to one of our previous episodes on Phantom of the Paradise, that was actually directed by Brian De Palma.
Yeah.
So, it's coming together in multiple ways, a 6 degrees of killer score, if you will. But yeah, this is famously Stephen King's favorite adaptation of any of his works. He said it, even though there are some changes, they're all so minor they don't really affect the plot or the story or the characterizations that much in a meaningful way. And this one has a pretty interesting figure behind the music, which I wanted to just talk a little about before we get into watching the film and getting back to you guys. The composer of this was actually a man by the name of Jack Nietzsche. And I was curious about Jack Nietzsche because the name sounded familiar, mostly because same last name as the famous philosopher. But I was curious if I'd seen his name attached to anything else. I was like, well, is this guy involved in anything I've seen? Turns out he was considered to be the right-hand man of the infamous record producer Phil Spector, believe it or not.
Oh boy.
But he also worked with several other famous groups by himself. Nietzsche did. He actually did record work for Rolling Stones, and he also did some work for Neil Young.
Oh wow.
Really?
Yeah. But it's not to say he exclusively focused on that. Obviously, there's this, which was his big, one of his big films when it comes to the score. But he also actually did the score for, I took some notes on this. He also did the score for The Exorcist, with William Friedkin's story, of course, which of course wasn't entirely his. Famously, I feel like Nietzsche actually gets glossed over in the case of The Exorcist.
Yeah, because everyone recognizes Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells.
Yeah, because that's like the big recurring motif. But he also did a lot of the incidental music in it. And famously, he also did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And the thing that he got the most critical recognition for was he won the Oscar for Best Original Song for the film An Officer and a Gentleman.
Oh.
Yeah, that love song from that movie that everyone knows, that was actually co-written. He was one of the co-writers for that.
That's an impressive track record there, honestly.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So Nietzsche's definitely got the career behind him in the belt. Stand By Me famously uses a lot of period-appropriate licensed music, a lot of very recognizable tunes. It's not a Tarantino situation where like it's the more obscure works from a certain decade. It's very recognizable pop hits from the era, but
very quintessential 50s, early 60s stuff.
Yeah, chances are if you've seen a movie set in the late 50s, you've heard a lot of these tracks in those sort of films.
There's a lot of overlap between this and, say, The Sandlot, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I've heard a lot of people compare the two films for many reasons. Many have said, The Sandlot is basically the sanitized version of this, which is very, very true.
Yes. I say that as someone who still loves The Sandlot.
It's a fine movie, but I feel like this film has a lot more impact once you've seen it. And, critics and the box office seem to agree. It was a pretty decent success at the box office. Film only had around an $8 million budget, made around $50 million, which is a modest success. But it's become more famous over the years for the fantastic performances from many of the actors in the film, and the fact that it has a phenomenal score.
Great score, great insert song usage, and if my memory serves me right from the last time I've seen it, it really is a one-of-a-kind Stephen King adaptation for both being true to the source material and also just for standing uniquely on its own as its own self-contained drama movie.
Yeah, it honestly seems like Rob Reiner really gets Stephen King's work, which is kind of shocking considering, Rob Reiner, a lot of people don't associate him with, like, a lot of the darker and heavier stuff that Stephen King covers, but, I mean, he also directed The Shawshank Redemption, which is also considered one of the best adaptations of Stephen King's work.
Rightfully so.
And Stephen King himself also loves that adaptation.
As is typical of our episodes, though, there is at least one of us who is viewing this for the first time, and
yes,
she may speak to her impressions going on right now.
That would be me. I have not seen this movie, and I have been meaning to for a long time. I knew about some of the actors in it. I didn't know that much about the score. I knew the song "Stand By Me," and I knew a little bit of the background, like it was originally based off. Well, it is based off a Stephen King novella. But I am excited to see this movie. It's something, as I said, I've been meaning to see for a while. From what I've heard and from what you've just told me.
Yeah.
That the actors, although they were pretty young when they started production, did a really great job of the work. I know some of the actors are like Corey Feldman, River Phoenix, Will Wheaton, for example, are a few of them. And I'm excited.
All right, cool.
Me too.
So we will be breaking away from you briefly to, reassess the film from a one angle and from another angle to view it for the first time and give you our thoughts on the film and its score. Hey, and we're back. Been a hot minute since I've seen that one, actually. I actually don't think I've seen that before in high definition. I remember I had, like, a DVD copy, but I watched it on, like, my little dinky old, like, gray CRT TV in my bedroom. Not like it was like a plasma screen or anything like that. Bulky old, like, CRT. So I couldn't get all the extra, like, little bits of definition stuff that's harder to pick up on smaller screen and with, like, worse definition. But I gotta say, it's held up. It's really held up. I haven't seen it since, like, I think I've only seen it a couple times before this, and wow, yeah, great movie. I feel like it deserves to be talked about to the same degree as other 80s, like, coming of age movies, if not more, because I feel like it's got a lot more humanity and depth to it. Also, like, just a lot more, it's more real.
Oh, yeah.
It's more real, too.
So there's a rawness to it that you wouldn't get with stuff.
Like the Goonies.
Yeah,
The
or a
Goonies.
John Hughes movie. I love John Hughes, but, his stuff's sanitized like crazy. You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, much like Dalton, this is my first time seeing it in a while. I was in early college, late high school the last time I saw it, and it still hits right here, just like it did before, but there's a lot of stuff that have changed about my perspective on this movie that I really appreciate, like interpretations of different characters like Teddy and Gordy, and there's a lot of personal resonance I have with all four of the characters for various reasons, and
Yeah.
I also just love the aesthetic and the production elements of this. I love the soundtrack. I love how this is set in the 50s that isn't in your face or cartoonish like Happy Days.
Yeah.
Oh god, yeah.
Or, like, I love Back to the Future, but they really hit you on the head with when it's the 50s in that movie. Like,
Yeah.
I understand it's for the purpose of the narrative, but at the same time, like, it's not like that, It's very subtle. Like,
In that
when it
movie's
takes
defense, it's more of a
culture,
lighthearted.
and it's a culture shock sort of situation,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
But no, this is great. I actually, this movie, I feel like seeing it now was a little better for me too, because, like, no lie, I think the reason I've loved this movie so much is when I first saw it, I was, like, at the age bracket of the characters in the movie.
Really?
Yeah, I first saw it when I was, like, middle school going into high school, sort of. So I was like just around their age.
Like 13, 14.
Yeah, I was like 13, 14, and
Yeah.
it was like I could totally connect with it, even though it was only like I was only like a little bit older, because I'd just been in that situation, and while I didn't really get friends quite as close during that age as the characters in the film, and I didn't really get really close friends until high school. I was a loner for a while there. I still felt it. Because I still had friends in school where I knew that exact bit at the end where he talks about how, like, eventually just another face in the hall. And I got that line because I totally had that happen
It's
to me.
sad, but
Realistic.
Yeah, it's very realistic. Because I remember, like, I had, like, I would say a good-sized friend group, elementary and middle school. But by the time high school came around, like, I only talked to, like, 3 of those people.
Yeah.
And then by the time I graduated high school, I only talked to 2 of them.
Yeah, you really dwindle down over time, and that's really realistic about this.
I was part of a chorus, and I barely talked to anyone from high school anymore.
Yeah, same.
I was in a theater group, and I barely talked to anyone from high school.
Maybe I should change that.
And for those of you who aren't aware, theater kids are always, like, screwing around. Theater kids are the Fleetwood Mac of high school. They're always, like, fighting, getting high, doing crazy shit, and, like, sleeping with everyone. That's generally how theater kids operate.
It's funny. I was like the Vern when I was in, like, high school theater productions.
Yeah.
Everyone was high-strung about something, and here comes Richie just striding in and being
Come
like,
on, guys.
"Come on, guys, let's have some fun here." And
Yeah.
I ended up
Not
having
now.
I ended up having a really nice green room because of that, actually. A lot of fond farewells, a lot
that's great.
Yeah.
of hugs.
Oh, yeah.
But I think we're escaping first impressions. Erin?
True.
Okay, so I actually really like this movie. As I mentioned, it did have a lot of heart. I didn't really know what to expect tone-wise going into the movie, because as I knew, it was based off a Stephen King novella where these 4 kids go in search of a body of another. Well, I didn't know it was another kid. I just knew it was like these 4 kids looking for a body.
Yep.
But I didn't. It actually exceeded my expectations because I didn't know 100% what to expect. But I didn't realize how much, like, how great the acting is from the 4 main leads. And these kids were, like, teenagers when they did this. They were teenagers.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, when we were watching the movie, when River Phoenix character, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying about Teddy, he was like, that kid's not gonna live to be 20. And it's just like, oh.
Yeah.
You might have missed it, but while that was happening, I was looking at Dalton, kind of losing it in the background, like, giggling. I'm like, she has no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know River Phoenix died really young.
Yeah.
But anyway, besides that, back to the movie. I do like how the soundtrack it didn't, like, hit you over the head with 50s music.
Yeah.
But it felt very honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how they use some examples of 50s music in it. Like, we heard, like, Lollipop or
Like
Rockin'
the
Robin.
Corvettes, Rockin' Robin, bunch of classics.
A bunch of classics. And as someone who watches some shows or TV, like some TV shows or movies that are set during that time period, usually it's like, oh, this song again, or there's so much of this, or like, why are you using this song? Like, I watch Call the Midwife and I love that show, but the problem with that show is that they use so much of music from that time period, like 5 times in an episode.
Yeah.
To the point it's beating you over the head with like 50s and early 60s music.
Yeah. One thing I remembered about Nietzsche's score from this was, when I was younger, I just remembered the 50s classics, but now as I'm older, I get to notice, like, his very subtle composition work in this movie, which I actually really appreciate.
Yeah,
It's very understated.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
He knows when to use it and when not to use it.
Yeah, because one of the first things I noticed at the beginning of the movie is that they didn't, basically like an orchestral version of the song Stand By Me.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, I didn't catch on to it, and
Yeah.
then it went on for a minute. I'm like, oh, this is Stand By Me.
Yeah, and it's very...
It's subtle.
And I love that version because it's the orchestral version is very melancholic.
It is.
And it has like this nostalgic tone to it, but it also feels melancholic more so than the actual song, more so than the Benny King version that's used in the movie.
Yeah.
And Nietzsche did a great job with this score. In my opinion, I think this is probably, in my opinion, of like the films I've seen where Nietzsche did the score, I think this is my favorite of his scores. Because, I mean, no knocks against, like, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or Exorcist, obviously, or... Well, I haven't seen Officer and a Gentleman.
Neither way.
And I've only seen bits and pieces of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I've never actually sat down and fully seen it.
Yeah.
But I feel like his score in this is probably his best work, just because, like, he really knows when to flex it and when to hold back.
Oh, absolutely.
It's right up there with The Exorcist as my favorite of his scores.
Yeah. Only reason I don't say The Exorcist is because, like, I'm gonna be honest, that's Mike Oldfield's baby.
Yeah.
It's Mike Oldfield's baby. Like, so much of his music was used for it. Like, of
and
course,
it's recognized
Tubular
as
Bells.
the theme for The Exorcist.
Exactly. And, like,
even though the song came out, like, 5 years before the movie.
And that was his baby, you know? And he's been, like, Tubular Bells is such a big thing for him. Like, fun fact about that. He constantly reworks and retools that song over the years. He's actually never been fully satisfied with it. It's like a song he's always working on and tweaking.
Yeah.
Like, he's one of those very perfectionist musicians who's very underground and just likes to do his own thing.
Kind of sounds like the musical version of The Thief and the Cobbler.
Yeah, very much so. But no, the score in this is perfect. Like, I mean, Officer and a Gentleman, I've heard it's a fine film and all, but, like, I just, you know, like, all people know about Officer and Gentleman is the original song from that movie, and it's just another love ballad, in my opinion. I mean, it's a good one, but it's just a love ballad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this just captures the era perfectly, the tone with the score, and like I said, I just love how it's kind of like muted when it needs to be. I love the fact that when there's like incredibly dramatic, heart-wrenching scenes, like where Chris like confesses the truth to Gordy about the theft incident that like has made Chris a black sheep in the town, and River just breaks down and it's enthralling. And there's nothing to distract you from it. You're just in the scene.
moment.
And the only sounds aside from them talking is just like incidental noises, like the crackling of the forest, like the campfire.
A little bit of crickets here and there.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It, like, really good sound design, really good score work by Nietzsche.
I think it all comes down to the precision of the score work,
exactly.
too. Because lesser movies, especially ones that are named after the insert songs, would have pressed the title song button over and over to the point of redundancy. Looking at you, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Like,
but
I think we only hear the orchestral arrangement of Stand By Me like
two or three times
in the movie.
And they're so subdued and so slow that it becomes less the song and more just like a leitmotif.
And they didn't do what a lot of lesser directors would do in that scene, where they're trying to show off like their new song in that, where they take stuff where you focus on the song. You're not really focusing on the song in those scenes, because whenever it plays, there's always characters on screen, and they're not saying anything. But just by the fact that there's emotion going on, due to, you know, the way cinematography and filmmaking works, you're focused on that. You're not listening to the music.
It's kind of like a music video.
Yeah.
One of those plot-centric music videos.
Yeah. Not one of those music videos where the plot of the video has nothing to do with the song.
Yeah.
But you see that a lot.
But circling back actually to something that Erin said earlier, where she said she loved the acting. The reason the acting is so good in this movie is because Rob Reiner recognized that camaraderie was going to have to be big. Like, people weren't going to buy this movie if
the
these
kids didn't act like they were friends.
Yeah. So they had the kids spend time together over a summer and stuff like that. And not only that, Rob Reiner said he wanted to make the movie feel as natural as possible because that was key. So every actor who played their part was chosen because they just felt like that kid.
Yeah.
They felt the most natural. Like, I remember, like, I saw a thing where Will Wheaton was speaking in an interview, and he was saying, like, how every kid in that movie was their character.
To a T.
Yeah.
And there was a really nice part of that same interview I saw where he had commented that, like, Jerry O'Connell in particular, who played Vern, was one of the sweetest and funniest people he ever worked with back then and has had the pleasure of seeing afterwards.
Yeah, and basically everyone involved, because Corey Feldman's gone through some shit, man.
Oh, yeah.
And basically everyone involved, like, was like, they could recognize that, you know, Corey was the chipper guy who was, like, photogenic and had a lot of, like, talent, but, like, they felt the rage underneath the surface. Like, they knew he had a darkness to him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that resonates so well as Teddy. Like, a lesser movie would have this kind of character. He's the friend that you wonder why the hell they're falling in with him. But there's a nice balance.
He's a charmer.
He's a
he
charmer.
Really is.
Yeah.
Like, he knows how to balance out the more douchebag moments with that inner vulnerability that only comes from a lot of mutually shared experiences.
Yeah, he comes off as that friend you want to fight for, but you don't know how to because they don't let you get too deep into the surface.
I have so many friends like that I could write a book.
It's really resonant. Like, they just made sure this movie was naturalistic as possible, which is why it works so well compared to a lot of other films with, like, that are coming of age, in my opinion, because it feels just so natural. For example, the scene where they're going through the swampy area, that was actually, like, they set that up, like, because they found, like, a forest they were going to film in, but it wasn't, like, natural. So they had to, like, put a bunch of water in there, and then they just let it sit for a summer. And that's why it looks so grody and natural, because it is. They made sure it was natural. And I really...
Just, like, trees grow around and stuff.
Yeah, they just took the topography and worked in the area to make it as natural as possible. And I love that because it also means they didn't destroy the landscaping for a scene, but they also didn't just do it on a soundstage.
All too common a practice.
Oh,
sadly.
yeah.
Yeah. Worst example of destroying a forest for a scene is Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Or, this is
Ouch.
one I feel like, I'm going to go off on a little, get on the pedestal here for a second, get up on my soapbox to get mad about something. I really feel like Mad Max Fury Road is a movie that people gloss over the shitty stuff they did in production just to praise the film.
Yeah.
Because they, like, fucked up that desert beyond belief.
Oh my god.
Yeah, a lot of, like, natural life was killed because of the filming, of the intensity of, like, all the engines and the gasoline and all that stuff. And it really destroyed a lot of the wildlife there. And a lot of the people were trying to call attention to it. Like, you know, like, conservationists and stuff were like, hey, could we not do this? And nothing was done. And still nobody is like, I haven't seen a lot of people call out George Miller for this. And I feel like it's him and the studio really got to be called out for this, because we only have so much life on this planet, and nothing, absolutely no movie, doesn't matter how good or shitty your movie is, it's not worth killing that much natural life just to get some cool shots.
Amen.
Yep.
Amen, brother.
I feel like nowadays we're so preoccupied with making our movies look as great as possible that we forget that we're sharing the planet with non-human life, and that it's our duty to try to preserve that because we've killed so much of it already. And I know I get up on soapboxes about things with my friends, but, like, I feel like if this gets an audience, I just want to, like, throw out stuff like that when I can, because we only have so much on this planet and we're sharing it. and we
Oh,
have
don't
to
worry.
remember that we're sharing.
Don't worry, we'll let you have that soapbox. I mean, if you think you're bad right now, just wait till we tackle a movie that has an autistic character.
Oh,
Oh, boy.
Oh boy.
true.
Oh boy.
That'll be the Richie show.
How pressingly sad is it that one of the best depictions of an autistic character on screen is from Saban's Power Rangers?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That says something. I mean,
Billy
no
was
knock,
so well written in
no
that.
knock against the cast or crew. They did a bang up job, but it's sad that one of the best big on screen representations I can think of is a goddamn Power Rangers movie. That's it. As someone who loves Power Rangers,
You know, I think it's because I hate myself.
Mm-hmm.
We might just have to cover music.
well, none of us have seen.
None of us
music.
have seen it. None of us want to see it.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly, because whole thing with our thing, someone has to have seen this before. But
I'll watch it once.
okay,
Because
Okay.
because as has been established, I hate myself.
yeah, and Sia, she's terrible. She's a terrible person. But
Yeah.
back
to
to
the
Stand By
movie.
Me.
If we survive after fans kill us after this.
Yeah.
This movie, I feel like it gets understated a lot in many ways, especially how influential this movie is. You can see a lot of movies trying to ape the tone.
Oh yeah.
As we said earlier, The Sandlot is highly reminiscent. I mean, there's even a scary junkyard dog that's not as scary as advertised,
The only difference here is the fallout of the scene is more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love the back and forth that goes on between Teddy and the junk person, the junk guy, because you feel kind of bad for him because they're picking on his dog, but then he starts
he goes
taking,
too far.
Yeah,
He goes too far. And
they take cheap shots about his dad being a loony.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like, dude, these are children. What is
Yeah.
wrong with you? He easily could have just dismissed it and went, go on, you kids, get out of here, and just done the typical thing adults like to do when they really want to chase off a kid, which was like, get out of here before I call the cops, because then the
Yeah.
kids will scatter off because they're kids.
Yeah,
But then he had to kick Teddy's heart
Yeah,
in the dick.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it feels realistic too because
Especially that time frame.
yeah, and not only that, small town, and as Letterkenny has famously taught us, bad gas travels fast in a small town. And yeah, no, it's I know I'm using the word a lot, but it's integral to making a movie like this because
Yeah.
movies that deal with non-fantastical elements, if you want people to remember it, if you want people to talk about it, cinematography, everything can only take you so far, but what really cements it in people's minds is making it feel real.
Yeah, and the scene with the junkyard where the guy at the junkyard is talking about Teddy's dad. The heartbreaking thing about that scene is that no matter how horrible Teddy's dad has been to him, he's still trying to defend his dad.
Yeah.
And that's so true to life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many people that come from an abusive situation like Teddy's in, where they can't grasp the fact that this person shouldn't necessarily be admired or stood up for, but you also get it because that's his dad.
Yeah, you see it a lot with children who've been abused trying to protect their parents.
It's so on the money and so
Yeah.
perfect.
And I've seen this situation firsthand with a lot of people that are close to me, and
I've seen it too. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
heartbreaking.
I actually kind of looked away when that scene was playing because I'm like,
Yeah.
just I didn't want to cry in front of you two, basically.
And I feel like what really puts this over the top for me, compared to a lot of other works, is the subtlety to it.
The subtlety.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this movie's understated, which works for it, given the type of story and the tone they're going for. That scene, all the scenes where we see Gordy's home life, because he's the only one whose home life we see
Actually
in
get to
detail, because he's the central viewpoint character,
Yeah.
and it really cements why a kid like him is hanging out with these other kids who have you've got Chris, who his entire family is treated as treated as like vilified in the town.
Yeah.
You've got
The ne'er-do-wells.
You've got Teddy, who's got like a shitty older brother, and so does Chris as well, who's also part of like Ace's gang.
Eyeball.
Yeah, and then you've got Vern's older brother, who's also part of the gang.
Oh.
And it's so like on the nose, and like you wonder why he would hang out with these people, but then you just see that like the sad part about Gordy is he has the most like easy to connect to sort of home life if you've come from a place that's been with loss, or even a place that just has like a sibling that's older.
Favoritism.
And like it's so heart-wrenching, and you get where his parents are coming from, but at the same time you wish the mom would stick up for herself a little more. You wish like Gordy's dad would just sit down with him and just talk to him.
Yeah. And I think that cuts to a deeper theme that actually shows up a lot in Stephen King's works. There's a heavy emphasis on cultural critique.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to that particular decade. Well, set of decades, the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, because that's when King grew up. So
like, he's one of those few writers who
doesn't
really
look back with rose-tinted glasses.
He's one of those few who really understands that life in that decade can read in many ways like a horror movie.
Yeah.
Like something that Jordan Peele would put together.
There's a few writers who are able to do that, like not a ton. I can think of the only other one I can really think of off the top of my head where I've seen like a non-ideal look back at the past is like Harukimurakami's stuff. He does that very well, I've noticed. But no, I can see why this is such a beloved adaptation by its creator too, because as someone who's read the original novella, spot on to the themes. The changes are very, very minor, to the point that you might not even notice them on a first watch unless you're like really paying attention. And
I'd argue necessary because, let's face it, who wants to have everyone besides Gordy die young?
Yeah. It doesn't feel as real, honestly. Like it feels like King gets a little too caught up in his own cynicism, which is really funny because my experience with King was I actually got into him because when I went into going into King stuff, and I do this a lot with very prolific authors or people who are just like have like a big story and stuff, I actually tend to start with like their less covered stuff because I feel like I can get more out of it and get what they're like without having like the taint of like the cultural
preconceived notions.
Yeah, exactly. Like the first King story I read was one of his works that had never been, and to this day has never been adapted. One of his Richard Bachman stories. Are you guys familiar with the Richard Bachman stuff?
Yeah.
Are you familiar?
No.
I think The Dark Half was one of them.
Yeah, Richard Bachman. I always thought this was interesting. King is very... one thing I appreciate about him, and I feel like the reason he gets so much media attention and coverage is not just because like how prolific he is as an author, but because of how non-reclusive and open he is compared to other writers. Like a lot of writers aren't as willing to talk about their work as he is. And King basically noticed that there was this one critic for some reason who just seemed to have it out for him, like a literary critic.
Yeah.
And he always made like the same critiques, and King was confused because he's like, is he just not getting my stuff? And like King was starting to think, he's like, I think this guy just is railing on me so hard because I'm Stephen King. Like, he sees that name and he just dismisses me because of how like I'm this big author who everyone talks about. So he created a fake person. He created Richard Bachman. And the story that he made was that the literary company that Stephen King worked for was going around recruiting for, like looking for new authors. And they were sent in a manuscript that they really liked. And they were like, who's this author? And everyone's like, well, we don't know this guy who's got this in. Apparently his name's Richard Bachman.
Yeah.
And then the story was that they went to find out who Richard Bachman is, found this house, found his wife who like talked about how her husband had passed away a while ago, and he was constantly writing. He wrote a bunch of stories, but he never turned them in for fear of rejection. And now that he was dead, she thought that maybe she would submit his stuff just to see for herself if anyone would pick up on it and like his stuff. That was all bullshit. That was all fake. But Stephen King helped his company, his publishers, like, construct this story because he wanted to see, will people still like my stories and give them good reviews
if it's not my name?
If it's not my name.
Yeah.
He wanted to test his own worth.
I think this whole background was a big inspiration for Secret Window, Secret Garden.
Mm-hmm. And it's so powerful, too, because the Bachman stuff, a lot of it's genuinely good, and some of it has been adapted. Sadly, I've noticed the Bachman stuff has not gotten the great adaptations, which really sucks. The most well-known Bachman story adaptation is The Dark Half.
Yeah.
And that's just not great. It's a cheap TV movie. And not to dismiss TV movies entirely. I mean, 2 King stories got adapted into TV series, like TV mini-movie series. Like, you know, of course, famously, the Tim Curry It.
Yes.
And the lesser talked about one that I still think is great, Salem's Lot. Which
great vampire story, that
oh
one.
Yeah, King likes it too. Like he even said, he's like he didn't talk about it for years, but after Tobe Hooper died, he like made a post on the internet saying like, rip Tobe Hooper, who I respected and did excellent work on the Salem's Lot series. He's not as big of a dick author as people like let him out to be. It's just that a lot of his stories have not gotten a fair shake, and the ones that we hear about that he doesn't like, he's very vocal about.
He's vocal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, once again, going back to the whole Shining thing, it's like when the King adaptations tend to go off the reservation, they really tend to.
Oh yeah.
They like hard left turn away from the original intent.
Yeah.
So it stands to reason that King would be a little,
and The Shining,
apprehensive about that.
Shining's not even the worst. Is the worst part.
No.
Like,
oh yeah.
He said like he's
the Running Man.
Yeah.
Oh god, the Running Man.
He's been open about that one. He doesn't like, but he wasn't outright offended by. He was just confused by, because he's like, why did you adapt the Running Man, and why is it like that?
Like,
and he was just confused.
Make no mistake, the Running Man is legitimately entertaining.
Yeah,
like,
but it's not a good movie.
It's not good.
It's cheesy fun. Like, it's not substantial.
The book is
it's
actually
a popcorn movie through and through.
The book, though, that is so dark. And
probably, by the way,
surprise, surprise, there's a reason why they remove the ending where the main character takes down the building of the television corporation responsible for filming the title game show. Yeah,
it's because, well, that's not a movie ending, and also we're a big company putting out this movie. We don't want people getting ideas. But no, probably the most notorious one that King has not spoken publicly about, but just his reaction alone speaks volumes, is The Lawnmower Man. Where he literally sued the company for putting trying to put his name on the product.
Yeah, they had it under the name Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man.
And he sued the fuck out of them for that. And
rightfully so, because one is...
He didn't agree to it. It was his publishing company that gave them the rights to do it.
I'm surprised that there wasn't any other lawsuits from whoever published Flowers for Algernon, because that's the movie Lawnmower Man. It takes so much from Flowers for Algernon that it's insane.
But
like the whole dumb guy gets experimented on and becomes smarter. The only thing they added was like that virtual reality stuff, which is like, hello 90s movie.
But yeah, I feel like this is one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best and most faithful adaptations of like a work that you can have without going either too deep into detail or super far off the reservation. I mean, it probably helps that it's a novella instead of like a full novel,
Yeah.
or a short story. Like, it's the perfect thing to do for like a 2-hour movie. You know?
Yeah, which is weird because Apt Pupil and Shawshank Redemption also serve as like examples.
Yeah, and they're also novellas as well. And
But
Yeah.
in Apt Pupil's case, it makes me wonder how they messed up the format. Like, there are things I like about that particular adaptation. For instance, Ian McKellen as Dosander.
King himself has even said that it's a pretty good adaptation, you know?
But the guy who plays Todd, like, here's how I put it: the movie adaptation of That Pupil is so far removed pacing wise because the novella, I cannot talk.
Yeah,
It's all about him slowly slipping into the type of evil that the Nazi war criminal.
Yeah, I think it's
partook in.
I think it's even called "The Fall from Innocence" is the subtitle from it.
No, that's the one for the body.
No, the body is the summer story.
No.
Really?
Well, the movie is set during the summer, but the book is
It's
Fall
the
from Innocence.
Fall from Innocence, and Apt Pupil.
Apt Pupil is Summer of Corruption.
Ah, that's right.
It goes like this: Shawshank Redemption, Hope Springs Eternal. The breathing method was that winter story.
Oh, I thought it was Dolores Claiborne.
Nope.
Oh, that's right. Dolores Claiborne has gotten an adaptation.
Oh yeah.
Which is also a solid adaptation. From
Great.
what I've heard. Yeah.
I don't know much about Stephen King, so I'm just letting these two talk.
Kathy
There's
Bates
a lot
is in
of
that one.
adaptations.
It's Kathy Bates and Jennifer Jason Leigh for Dolores Claiborne.
Okay.
And it's a great murder thriller mystery about the dynamics of motherhood.
You know what I feel is another good King adaptation, even if it does differ in more drastic ways, but King hasn't been super open about it, but at the same time, he did sign off himself on the movie, so it seems like he approved of it. And I feel like it might be decent to cover, if one of you hasn't seen it, Christine.
I've seen it.
I haven't.
Yeah, it's good.
There we go.
Well,
Yep.
John Carpenter. But
John Carpenter.
need I say more than John Carpenter, the man who's had maybe 2-3 bad movies in his entire filmography?
Mm-hmm.
Those effects too.
Oh yeah, he's
The-
amazing.
Like,
Perfect creator.
yeah.
You know?
Back to the theme of cultural detritus.
Mhm.
This shines a spotlight on the antiquated ideals of Americana in that.
And how
in that
harmful that decade's like idea.
Nostalgia.
Not only that, but
Masculinity.
yeah, and the latchkey kid nature of the time,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, oh yeah, you're gonna go do that thing. Sure, why not? And we see that these kids are deeply troubled just because like they are so free roaming. It's good to give your kids freedom, but not to the extent where you're just like, oh yeah, just be back by a certain time, nobody cares, because that's how you get kids that get into huge trouble. Like these kids are smoking even though they're 12, and they think it's a great idea to go off to try to hunt for a dead body.
And they're
And they
packing
literally
heat.
Yeah.
and they literally said in the beginning, it was like, oh yeah, just tell them that we went over to this place, and then they're gone for like 3 days.
Yeah, and nobody
Nobody notices.
questions it.
Yeah, and that whole idea of small town reputation mongering
Oh
is just it's a big theme of this, and this movie is a first-hand fictional demonstration of how incredibly traumatic that is for people.
And it doesn't do the idealized small town like a lot of fiction does, because it's such a fictional cliche to have like small town living is just inherently better and more constructive and makes you a better person. Like that.
Cough, Hallmark movies.
Yeah, it's not always the case, because in some cases it's so egocentric to be like, oh, well, nobody knows who you are in the city. Who cares?
Yeah, no one really cares.
Who cares? Why would I care if nobody knows who I am in a like a certain area?
I prefer to have no one know who I am.
I'm just a guy. I'm not some big celebrity. I don't care. Why should I care? it shows how
Yeah.
egocentric the filmmakers of these kind of projects are.
Yeah, put too much emphasis on the small town environment, and you come dangerously close to resembling what sounds like a rejected Tucker Carlson screenplay.
Yeah, this is beautiful because it demonstrates the quintessential essence of the Americana feel and nature between the cinematography and the story and the plot and the design of it, while not idealizing it too much.
It's actually a unique middle ground. Yeah, it shows the dark underbelly of small time prejudices, but the kids still have a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I mean,
and the casualness of, just like slurs too, like they say some ableist stuff at the time, but you never get
homophobic.
Yeah. But you never get the impression that the kids themselves using these words mean it with like the particular malice that is connotated behind these words. It does a great job showing that these are kids and they're just using words that are like
trivialized,
used so casually and trivialized.
Yeah.
Which is why it's good to have these sorts of movies to sort of shine a subtle enough light on it.
Yeah. And I don't think it can be understated. I think one of the last things I could say for this personally, before letting you guys have some of your own thoughts, is I don't think it can be understated just how influential this film was outside of the Anglosphere, actually. This film is incredibly influential and popular in Japan. When it came out in Japan, it was a phenomenon. It was huge there, and a lot of Japanese fiction that like uses elements of Americana takes visual influence
Case in
from
point,
Stand By Me. Most famously is Itoi, the creator
Shigesato Itoi.
Shigesato Itoi, the creator of the Mother series.
Or Earthbound.
Yeah. Mother over there, Earthbound over here, since only one game technically made it out over here until beginnings, but whatever. He stated in interviews this was a huge influence for his design over the series, and the aesthetics and the music, and of course a more subtle one, but probably one that more people, I feel, in our viewer base, especially people in our age demographic, will recognize, is that it is referenced in the very first Pokemon game and referenced incredibly early in the game. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
When you turn on the TV in Red's room, it says, on the television is a film. It features 4 children walking down the train tracks.
Yep.
Yeah. An explicit reference. And
that whole aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the extent that, I kid you not, it was so influential over there that they sold special versions of the movie in Japan designed to help teach English to Japanese children.
That's new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I found incredibly interesting and also, like, really cool. Like, it goes to show you how, like, certain things just get ported over to other regions and you have no idea what they do over there with it. It's so fascinating whenever you see stuff like that.
Yeah.
And really cool. But, I guess, Aaron, I want to hear a little more of your stuff. Closing thoughts. Obviously,
Closing thoughts?
I think this is great. I think we're a good point to wrap it up. You guys think?
Yeah. There was one thing I wanted to mention about the cinematography.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that it's gorgeous, it's well shot.
Yeah.
I think my favorite moment in there is easily the campfire scene because of the clever use of crossfades.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Reminds me of like the scenes in early That 70s Show where they're like smoking around like the table in Eric's basement and crossfades to the different cast members.
Like,
because it has the same tone too.
You hear Richard Dreyfuss narrating in his memoirs about how they were answering the important questions
before boys discover girls.
Yeah. And
it's all
like,
dumb crap.
How is Goofy a dog?
Yeah, or
it pans over
to each of them
before fading to the next shot, and all of them go back and forth about Goofy, but I like how they space
it's
out
not
the
back
goofy
to forth,
stuff.
back to forth. It almost feels like non sequiturs almost until
Yeah,
they reel
'cause-
it back in, and then
Really-
it makes it even funnier.
Really gives you the feeling of being in that moment with them. Just sit. It's like you're sitting out there with them, listening and laughing along. But
Shooting the shit with your friends when you're a kid, talking about dumb
around a
crap.
campfire,
Yeah.
talking about really dumb stuff.
Enough about my cinematography fetish, everyone. Aaron?
As an expansion on the cinematography,
It's great.
I am a nerd for a good cinematography.
It's great. I don't think we emphasized
me too.
it enough. Same. I don't think we emphasized it enough. Like, the use of lighting in this movie, sublime. I'm
Yes.
just going to say that.
And I love how the scene where they're running down the train tracks and the train is coming and they're all like freaking out trying to get off the bridge. There's one shot that I thought was really well done. I mean, besides the fact that the camera kept going back and forth between Vern and Gordy running, and then Chris and Teddy on the other side screaming like, "Get off! Run! Run! Run!" There was a couple of shots in there that I really enjoyed. One of the shots was when you see it like the camera's kind of off to the side, but you still see them running.
Yeah.
And then a distant shot, which is 99% taken from a helicopter,
How else would you have done
how
that?
else would you have done it back
Or
in the 80s?
or like a hanging dolly or
Or a
something.
hanging dolly,
Yeah.
but that was a pretty hard shot to get.
Especially out in the
guarantee.
open,
Especially out in the open.
in the middle of a big-ass hanging bridge train track.
Well,
Yeah.
there was some high up trees nearby. Like, you can do a lot of stuff with like crane arms
I
and
keep
stuff.
forgetting how tall trees are.
Yeah.
Anyway, Aaron.
The scene, which I call it a helicopter shot because that's probably how they did it, but there's other ways. There's many other ways they could have gotten that shot.
Looked a little too steady for a helicopter.
That's true, but also they did the first opening scenes with the sound of music in a helicopter.
Yeah, but that's like sweeping and stuff.
That's true.
Yeah.
This was a little too steady, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, the shot, that exact shot where it's like so far out and you see the train coming and the kids running. I love that shot. The other scene that Richie mentioned
Puts
when
it
we
into
watched
perspective. Yeah.
puts it in perspective. And the other was one Richie mentioned when you see the sunrise over the field.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I love that shot as well.
Yeah, that train scene is great, especially because I feel like what helps mount the dread too, aside from those like all the different types of shots they
And all
switch
the
between,
angles.
is how whenever they cut back to Gordy and Vern, you see they do a great job of making that smoke fill up more and more of the scene, so it's like got this encroaching dread even more just than just seeing the image of the train getting closer.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
it cuts over to Gordy's perspective, and as he looks out, you're already put on edge by the fact that he's feeling the train tracks for vibrations, but then
The smoke
The
in the
tree
distance.
line.
You see the
smoke in the
smoke
tree
before
line.
you see the train, which I think
And-
is so. And
that's good filmmaking.
And not only that, but
Yeah.
as an audience member, you already realize what it is because they've established the train so much already.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, especially because of the close call earlier in the film where Teddy
Tries
is
to
trying to be
jump
a
it.
cool dude and like
Jump out of the way
with
of the
a
train last
coming,
minute.
and
Last second, really.
it makes you think, okay, that's going to come back into play later.
Yeah, it's good foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Great setup payoff.
Yeah.
And they do a great narrative subversion of expectations because literally it's not even the two characters who were already involved in that situation getting involved in the situation. It's
It's
Yeah,
the
other
smart.
two,
It's the cautious ones.
which makes it even more.
I just
like,
realized that it's Gordy the
Gordy and Vern.
straight man and
Yeah.
Vern the overly
coward,
cautious coward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
amazing,
Well, in the earlier scene, it was Teddy and Chris.
who are more reckless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides the shot composition, which I love.
Transitions.
Transitions, yes. Another thing, we already mentioned the acting from the kids in the movie who are now probably in their 40s.
Still kicking ass.
Still kicking ass, yeah.
Of course, the exception of
And
River
River Phoenix, who died when he was, like,
rest
19.
in peace.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
The way that the music was placed for certain scenes, I also really enjoyed. Because there was one scene when they were listening to the radio and they're walking through the woods, and you can see them singing along to Lollipop by the Chordettes.
Yeah.
Because like you heard it on the radio in another scene, and then it goes back to them listening to the radio.
And when they're
walking through the
singing it,
woods.
and you're like, wait, how are they but where are they hearing that from? And then you see them dancing, and like your attention, you realize how they're hearing it because since they're swaying, you see the radio, the handheld transistor radio in Vern's hand, which really establishes it perfectly.
Oh, yeah.
That editing there was just so clean too.
Very good.
It kind of reminds me of like a proto Edgar Wright type deal.
Yeah.
Like you see
I would
those
be
sorts
surprised
of.
Edgar Wright took some like inspiration from
The music work in the
work
story.
in the
Yeah.
Especially if you see the tequila scene from Baby Driver.
Oh yeah.
It's so well done, like we said. And the fact, I love the fact that we don't hear the titular song in its original format until the end of the movie.
Until
Very
the
end.
credits.
When we've seen that Gordy's grown up. And not only that, but we see that he's become the kind of father
That he needed.
that his father
Failed
never
to be.
was for him.
Yeah.
Like, he's clearly very invested in his children. He gets a little caught up in his work, but not to the extent that his kids are neglected.
Yeah.
And they brush it off in a fun way too.
Him
The friend
playing
is
with his
just like
kids.
the friend's like, he said that a half hour ago. He's like, my dad gets like that when he's writing.
And
you know?
then they cut over to Richard Dreyfuss's face, and it's like he's giggling on that note, like, "Yeah, I do get that way.
yeah,
Got me there, kid."
yeah,
And he runs out.
the way he finished it, you see him writing, and the fact that he was narrating the lines before that we saw on the screen, but that last one, they just draw your attention to the screen. It's not directly stated, and you just get to see the impact of him realizing it at the same time as the audience.
No sound either, but the
The
tapping.
clacking of the keys. It's
Yep.
perfect.
Yeah.
And then immediately going into Betty King, and you realize that the song is less referring to the fact that it's a group of friends who are standing together and like watching over each other, and it's become now, it's gone from being about that to being about how Gordy is a good parent
Yeah.
who's
He's there for his
always there
kids.
for his kid.
And is
He's standing
carrying
by them.
those experiences with him, even if they're not necessarily in the same
Relevant anymore to him.
Yeah.
room. Yeah. Like they're standing by him, even though they're not standing by him.
It's like one of those perfect usages of letting a score enhance your movie, but not letting your score carry your movie.
Yeah, because you see that a lot. I don't. You see that with jukebox musicals, especially where the score or the soundtrack is just like, oh yeah, it's just carrying the whole movie.
Or films in general where so much emphasis and marketing is put on. Look at all these songs we got.
Case in point, rock and roll.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
case in point, like for a more modern, relevant example, Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Where I knew more about the music going into that movie than I did about the film
movie.
itself, which
was a mess.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the music is used so poorly in that movie.
They beat you over the head, and it's
on the nose.
It's on the nose in like a Baz Luhrmann type way, but without any of the fun.
Yeah,
Like,
or the finesse, or the flashy visuals that go with the Baz Luhrmann thing. It's so dull. And we want to give a highlight on this podcast. I feel like this film is the quintessential like vision of the kind of films we're trying to like show you guys. Films
And highlight.
that don't like let their soundtracks carry them. Films that let the score inform the audience without holding their hand.
A perfect ballet, if you will, of cinematography,
With
acting,
sound design.
writing, sound design, and music.
It's a great movie, and I encourage our audience to go out and see it if they haven't already. Signing off for Killer Score, I am Dalton Morrison. I will put my stuff in the description below to let you know where you can find me. I am on Twitter, I am on YouTube, I have projects coming up, and I'm involved with some other stuff I will link below.
I'm Erin. I am. Well, if you've been listening, you know who I am. I'm from Witch and Crafts. Link in the description. And yeah, I will be signing off, and I will hand it over to Richie.
Richie Eckert of Rich Reviews and my YouTube channel at just Richard Eckert, bringing you hopefully some new video content related to movies, which I haven't done in forever, and all sorts of character voice work and contributions to other projects. Links in the description below. Please see this movie.
Yeah.
Please see this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. We might be gone for a couple of weeks due to our own stuff, but we will be back sometime this summer.
Yeah, with a surprise, because we're not even sure yet what it'll be, but
yeah,
we love and appreciate you guys. Thanks for checking us out. If you can spread the word, keep coming back. That's all we asked for you guys. And
like, comment, share.
Yep. Tell your friends, tell your family if you think they'll enjoy it. You guys mean the world to us, because we wouldn't be doing this show without our listeners checking in.
Yep.
And,
Quite.
yeah. Signing off. Love you guys.